Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm an eQuip partner. eQuip is a virtual partnership in support of qualified individuals throughout the United States. eQuip partnership features content and discussion threads that are only available for partners. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can become an eQuip partner and how to utilize our shared virtual space. Start by visiting us at www.equippartnership.org. Clicking on the Join eQuip button takes you to a short sign-up form you can use to let us know a little bit about you. We use an interactive platform known as Basecamp to create a private virtual space for eQuip partners. After you complete the sign-up form, you'll receive an email and link from basecamp.com inviting you to join. Use the link to create your password and establish your account. If you already have a Basecamp account, that's okay. You'll be able to see the eQuip partnership content in addition to your other Basecamp projects. When you're logged into Basecamp, it should look like this. Here you see we can click into eQuip Partnership. The virtual space has three key sections. The discussion board is where important topics and conversations will take place. Feel free to start a new discussion or comment on one that's already taking place. The links and download section will feature documents, videos, and other content developed by eQuip partners. The schedule section will update you on future live events, social gatherings, and whatever else we can cook up. And one last thing, by default, Basecamp sends you an email each time something new gets posted. This might be a bit much for some of you. Update your notification settings by clicking on your account at the top right. Basecamp will also send you a daily update email each morning so you can follow what's being discussed and posted. We invite you to join the conversation and engage with your colleagues. We look forward to getting to know you and working together to better serve children and families.
Hello, I'm April Fernando, and welcome to today's eQuip live event. If this is your first time joining us, we're really glad that you're here. eQuip is a virtual partnership of qualified individuals and independent assessors from around the country. It's a forum where assessors can learn from each other and grow professionally. To learn more about eQuip and join the partnership, scan the QR code that's on the screen and visit us at eqipartnership.org. It's my pleasure to welcome back Bob Lieberman to continue our conversation on residential treatment. Bob is a consultant with extensive knowledge on psychiatric residential treatment and mental health services. He's also a senior consultant with the Building Bridges Initiative. He's written extensively and most recently co-edited the book Transforming Residential Treatment Interventions, Practical Strategies and Future Directions. Welcome, Bob. It's nice to have you back.
Thanks, April. Great to be here again.
Today, my goal is to give you time to provide specifics on the treatment approach in the residential environment and how assessors can use this information to determine who would benefit most from this type of care. So I'll warm us up with a really broad question. From your perspective, what are the characteristics of a qualified residential treatment program or QRTP?
Well, what I'd be looking for if I was a QI, or I guess you would call it an IA, independent assessor, I'd be looking for how can I understand the characteristics of the culture of the program and the approach that the program, the philosophy and I guess mindset that the program takes towards doing the work with youth who are so troubled and with their families. So I'll be trying to understand the program, and I'm imagining that in different states, QIs have different degrees of freedom in terms of how much time can they spend getting to know the various residential programs they might be authorizing for a youth to enter. Do they have time to visit those programs? Do they have time to, kind of review their statements, their program descriptions, those kinds of things? And I know that may vary, but to the degree possible, I'd be looking for, if I was a QI, I'd be looking for some characteristics that is reflected in the culture and in the practice of the program both. And so those characteristics would include to what degree families involved, to what degree is it, might we call it family driven, where families have an equal say at the table regarding the planning for their youth, and where families have some say in the program design and some say in quality improvement, those kinds of things that happen in the program. To what degree is it youth guided or youth driven? So do the youth have a voice of what goes on in the treatment environment? Do youth have a voice in their own treatment plans? Some programs have the youth leading their treatment planning meetings, which is a great skill for youth to develop. So the phrase "nothing about us without us," I want to see if that's something that the program really believes in, as reflected by the staff and what I see in the notes, what I see if I were to visit, what I would feel in the culture, what I would see in the staff interactions with the youth. Of course, I would want to know that the program really emphasized cultural humility and linguistic competence. So is language a barrier for the youth? And are the staff help to understand implicit bias? Or they help to understand what cultural humility means? Very simply, that the person I'm working with knows more about their life than I do. And we in this field sometimes, we are experts, and sometimes we take the role of experts and we kind of take the persona of experts, and that creates a power differential with the people we're working with to the degree we assume that persona. And so are the staff help to reduce that power differential, and especially as it comes to cultural humility, which applies across cultures. That could be white person to white person, as well as people of color to people of color. Is my assumption that I have something to learn from this youth, and we're going to work collaboratively together to figure out what's best for them going forward. Does the program treat its staff and youth equitably? I would try to get a sense of that. Sometimes you can't see what's happening with the staff. If you're a QI, you're looking at the documents regarding the youth that you're being asked to assess and weigh in on. But to the degree that you can learn about the programs, that I could learn about the programs that I might refer you to, I'd try to understand what's their equitable practice, how well embedded is that in the organization, because that's really going to affect how the organization is going to respond to BIPOC youth and LGBTQ2IS youth. So I'd want to understand that about the organization. Maybe I should have said it first. To what degree is the organization trauma-informed? And trauma-informed has a lot of, there's still varying meanings for what trauma-informed really means. And there's a federal interagency work group on trauma-informed care that's basically recommending to Congress to get a kind of uniform definition we can have across the country, but we don't have one now. There's a lot of ways to think about trauma-informed. And it'd be hard for a QI necessarily to assess that. If they could walk into the organization, they can probably feel it. If they have time to go see the organization, develop partnerships with the staff. But to what degree are the staff helped to understand kind of the scientific basis of why we want to be trauma-informed, what that really means from a scientific framework, especially the brain science. So trauma-informed, just simply I would want to see, is the organization sensitive in how they relate to the staff and staff to youth, which would be more visible to me as a QI or IA, are they sensitive to the impact of the stress response system? That youth come into our agencies, they're carrying a boatload of stress as it is. And then coming to a residential program, now they're being taken out of their home community, out of their homes, and that's an additional stress on top of it. So their baseline stress is really pretty high. And then we're doing a lot of things with them and telling them what to do and emphasizing that we're running their treatment plan and we know what to do and all of that. And that can increase the stress. So is the organization sensitive to trying to minimize the degree to which we're increasing the stress on the youth at any given moment, whether that's an individual youth or the whole group? And using that kind of framework and lens to look at how trauma-informed is the organization. Am I seeing in the charts evidence that this youth is going to get triggered pretty easily? And does the organization appear to be sensitive to trying to understand those triggers and trying to avoid those triggers? in their interactions with the youth, moment in time, and also in whatever happens in individual therapy. Another category I'd be looking at is the organization strengths-based. Are we looking at the youth strengths and needs? Or are we looking at the youth diagnostically through some kind of DRG group and wondering, assessing the youth that way? So is the organization assessing the youth strengths and what the youth needs to help affirm those strengths and build new strengths? And that's going to be entirely individualized. So I'd be, honestly, with all due respect to my residential colleagues, I'd be wary about one-size-fits-all systems in residential, like points and level systems, which are the same across a number of different youth who are individualized, who are individuals. I'd be nervous about that. I'd want to know from the organization how that fits into individualized treatment. And is the organization using data and looking at outcomes and trying to look at quality improvement in their ongoing work? So do they see, if I'm a QI or an IA and I'm expressing some concern to the organization about some of their practices or some of their culture, are they open to that? Are they open to, we want to improve, because what we're trying to do is help youth change and help families change. And change doesn't happen easily. And in order to do that, we have to be willing in our organizations to encounter change ourselves and to be open to change and to be open to the feedback that might stimulate quality improvement or other kinds of changes. So that's a fairly long list. That's fairly long list.
That is a great list. And I think what you shared is really, really helpful. I want to follow up on your comments about trauma-informed care and understanding neurocognitive development. I imagine that there are challenges to getting residential staff sufficiently trained on and being able to apply trauma-informed practice to the treatment environment. So what are some strategies that can help in developing these skills with residential staff?
Well, I think in general, the strategies have to do with training that really speaks to the frontline staff. We know that the frontline staff, and they have various titles. It might be called milieu counselors, it might be called residential counselors, it might be called child care workers, it might be called youth counseling professionals. I'm working with several residential programs, and no two have the same title for the people who are with the youth. They wake them up in the morning, they help them move through their day to school, out of school, into the evening, the activities, into the community, and put them to bed at night, and then are there overnight. And we know that most of the change happens in those moments that these staff are interacting with the youth. The therapists are certainly very important, and so are the care managers or care coordinators. But that moment in time intervention, this research going back to the 1800s, that moment in time, the immediate caregiver has the biggest impact. So I'd want to make sure that the training was attuned to them, that it was in language that they can understand, and that it gave very practical examples of what they experience day in and day out when youth become dysregulated. And I'd want to try to narrow that down and focus it on key elements of the brain science. The brain science, of course, we can spend many years in college studying brain science, but there's key elements of the brain science that are really instructive that, in my experience, when I'm working with frontline staff, they really can grab onto and they really can understand. And that has to do with the stress response system. And I probably won't go into that now. So if I was, my ability as a QI to understand that in an agency, again, might vary from state to state, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But I try to understand what their training plan is, and not only what training do they deliver to the frontline staff. Often training is that's an easy budget cut. I was a CEO for many years. Training is an easy budget cut. I never did it, but I always knew there was a place that if it was a real crisis, I can get some money was out of the training budget. So training often gets circumscribed, especially for the people with the lowest level of credential, which is usually their frontline staff. Right. I would want to see what's their training philosophy. Do they give a lot of training to the frontline staff? And do they follow up critical? Do they follow up with moment in time coaching? Do they have a way that staff can, in their supervision, is a supervision reflective supervision in nature? And do they have a way that staff can come in and just process without fear of any kind of job performance issue, just process the mistake that they made and have that be done openly and reasonably with their supervisor? Do they have ongoing coaching as a team to try to understand, well, here's what kind of stress response did you get from the youth, and what might you have done differently to maybe still intervene and still have that stress response not be so pronounced? So I'd be looking for that, and how are we supporting staff in doing what we might call trauma-informed work. and how is the organization supporting the staff?
Mm.
A lot of times people think of trauma-informed care as what we're doing with the youth and with the families that we're working with. But really, a trauma-informed organization includes what are we doing from the board level on down, and from whatever the bottom of the organization, the ground level of the organization is up. What are we doing across the organization to put these principles into practice with the people who work with us and work for us, our volunteers, the parents who come to the organization? How are we implementing these same principles across the board? That's a tall order. It's a tall order for residential programs. And so it'd be on a continuum. If I was a QI and I had the ability to understand all that about the organization, I'd want to see, are they on that journey? Is the organization moving ahead as best it can? And sometimes it's going to be fits and starts incrementally to make that change to become, quote, quote, trauma informed.
Yeah.
I'm putting quotes because it's so variably understood.
Absolutely. And that's really important because, as you mentioned several times now, it's really important to match the young person to the setting where they can get, the support they need. And some kids have more need for trauma-informed care than others. And so understanding those aspects that you just outlined can be really, really important. I want to go back to something else you hinted to earlier. When you were talking about the qualities of the characteristics of a quality QRTP, and that has to do with LGBTQ or BIPOC youth. So are there aspects of the treatment approach within residential care that we should understand when we're assessing LGBTQ or BIPOC youth?
I think at this point in the development of the field and what's where we can expect residential programs to be and go with that, I'd be looking at kind of the big picture of the program. What's the culture? What's their belief statement? Do they have statements in their statement of values or in their organizational description? Like if they're accredited, there's probably some kind of comprehensive program description that I think all the accrediting bodies would like to see or require. So how are they talking about youth with differing gender identities? How are they talking about people of color, BIPOC youth? What seems to be their philosophy? What seems to be their mindset? And then how is that being implemented by the staff? I'd be looking at that as a main feature, try to understand how able are they to respond to youth of differing gender identities, BIPOC youth, because that's going to set the stage. That's going to set the stage for the individual treatment approaches. If they're doing that, and there's a document that BBI is putting out. It's a theory of change document. It's actually a logic model for it's culturally humble and linguistically competent services in the residential environment. And there's another section on equitability. So there's a lot of practices. There's a lot of distinct practices we'd want to look at, hiring practices to make sure our staff look like the youth who we're serving. I'd want to see that in the organization. There's a lot of very specific practices. We're trying to understand the youth from their perspective. So that's cultural humility. You know more about your life than I do. I'm an expert in some things. You're an expert in your own life. And so let's join our expertise together. Help me understand what's important to you. Help me understand what your needs and strengths are. My general thought about this is if we're providing truly individualized care, then we're understanding the individual needs. And I think trauma-informed care actually is universal, not based on individual needs, but in individualized care, we're understanding the individual needs, and that's going to be different for people of differing gender identities, different cultures, different races, different nationalities, different languages. So are we really attuning to that and trying to meet those needs? And in doing that, are we also involving the family? So we may want to, we had a youth in our program, this is embarrassing, this is back in the 80s, who was a Native American in heritage, and he did really well with us. But close to his discharge, I was having lunch with him one day, and he said, no one has ever asked me about my cultural background. Like major, this is when we had kids for more than a year. Our length of stay got down to about 110 days before I left. Major embarrassment. He's Native. We knew he was Native. Nobody asked him about his cultural background. There was no effort to support him in celebrating his cultural traditions. And that was in my agency, and I found out by having lunch with him. He wasn't complaining. He just brought it up. he liked what we were doing. So is the organization really reaching out with that kind of attunement and sensitivity to what the youth are bringing into the program when they come to us?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense, and really good points. And we all have those stories of having learned painful lessons,
Mm-hmm.
but we learn the lessons, and we shift the way we run our programs, we run our treatment, and they're good lessons to learn.
And I think a QI should be looking for that too.
Absolutely.
As the program changing,
Mm-hmm.
some of the residential programs really struggle, and I say that with all due respect to my colleagues, and a lot of them do really good work. I think most residential programs do good work within their confines, but they don't necessarily connect before and post residential with what the youth might need. So it becomes an isolated experience from the youth rather than an experience that's continuous with kind of their narrative of their lives. And so, but of QI, I think can be looking at, are these programs, do we see evidence that they're learning their lessons as they come to us painfully sometimes, and deciding to make improvements with those lessons, or some programs circle the wagons and fight back? And I'd be nervous about those programs, honestly.
Yeah. It's interesting because sometimes we think of referrals being made because of relationships we've established in those programs, right? And the reason we do that is those relationships are based on things like we know they do well with African American youth, or they make extra effort with Native American youth, right? So there's reasons we do that, but it also behooves us to understand programs that maybe we're not so familiar with, because they may have hidden gems in them that really take into account who children are and who their families are and work with them. So thanks for sharing that, Bob. I think it's really helpful. In our previous conversation, you began to talk about the unique aspects of a residential treatment program model that you helped develop. And I was struck by something you said. So let me quote you. You said, the involvement of families and the nature of the handoff back to the community are key determining factors in post-residential care outcomes for youth. I wonder if you can speak more about this, and specifically the work that the family peer supports do.
Yeah. My temptation is to speak about the rationale behind that statement first. And
Okay.
I don't know if that's obvious, but youth come from families. I've worked with youth with horrendous family histories, honestly, with all due respect to their family. But our efforts to help them maybe separate from their family almost always fail. And finally, we learned from those experiences that if we involve the families, regardless of what had happened with their child, families like a mother who broke her son's arm and was embarrassed and locked him in the closet for a day, pretty horrendous levels of abuse and neglect. And I could tell a whole story about that particular family. The more we involve the families, the better it goes. And that's, but when we're born, we connect with our immediate caregivers. We have to in order to survive. It's a primary biological wiring that we have. And so that continuity of experience with the family has also been found to be a key determinant of outcome. What's the continuity and quality of the relationship with the family? So the research that shows a key determinant of outcome kind of resonates with the brain science, where in our brains, we're connected with our parents. And if our parents did something, then that must be the way the world is. And so as we learn that's not the way the world is, can we still then repair and heal that situation with our parents? And then we have more continuity of experience in our brain, more continuity of our narrative that we live our lives by, and our relationships have healed. But the comment really also came from the evidence that there's research going back to 1980 that those two factors were key determinants of outcome. And so how do we engage the family so they're involved integrally in the treatment from the point of referral? During the intake process, we're reaching out, we're involving families, we're valuing their expertise, even if we have concerns about how they've treated their youth. Sometimes their rights are terminated. Are we involving other people who might be family members, other kin, so that the child has a sense of belonging? But with the family specifically, are we involving them at the beginning and throughout the treatment process? Are we kind of helping them restore their rightful role in the life of the child as a person who makes decisions, or are we taking that role from them and making decisions? So if we're partnering in decision making, the child is experiencing that, the youth is experiencing that. They may not like the decisions, or they may think, boy, that's okay. My family and my therapist are working together on my behalf. When they see people working together on their behalf, they get more of a sense of I belong here, more of a sense of ability to regulate themselves and develop those neurocognitive skills. So that family involvement throughout is really, really critical, and it helps pave the way for a successful transition into the aftercare phase, which of course is really big for QIs to be looking at as well as part of the QRTP process, is what's going to be happening with aftercare. So it's that handoff back out of the residential environment. The residential environment, we used to consider this to be a cloistered place where the youth is going to get this very careful, sensitive treatment, and they're going to get stronger and better, and then they're going to be able to withstand the vagaries of the world. That's great if we can help the youth do that. But if they're doing that in context of where they live, in context of where they belong, in context of their community, in context of their family, then they could take what they've learned from us, the skills they've gained from us, into the world much more smoothly, much more adroitly, I guess you might say, as they transition out. So that's some context for that comment. Family peer support specialists, to the second part of the question, they're family members who have lived experience of having a kid in the system. So the system could be just the outpatient system or the juvenile justice system or child welfare system, but also often they have experience with having had a kid in a residential program, maybe in the same program that they're hired in. And these are people who are hired as staff. It's a staff position. Many states, not all, certify family peer support specialists. So once they're certified, Medicaid can be billed if there's a Medicaid billing opportunity in the state for their time. And so they're hired as members of the staff. And what they bring to their work with the family is they've been there, done that. So the power differential that happens between us professionals, families come to us and they want us to tell them what to do. They're desperate at the point of entry into residential. They want us to tell them what to do. But us telling what to do, we're not always going to be there. So how do we help them learn what to do? Through guiding them, through coaching them, through facilitating that process. And a family peer support specialist, someone who's been there, done that, removes that defensiveness that families feel in conjunction with professionals, and helps them feel like there's somebody I can talk to who gets it, understands what I've been through because they've been through it as well. So that engagement really happens much more smoothly with family peer support specialists. And then when we have them hired, they can serve a lot of functions in the organization. There's a long list. They can provide education to the parents. They can provide training to the parents. They can provide training to the staff. I wrote down some things before, but they can be a voice in the treatment planning meetings, helping the parents articulate. It might be parents come into treatment planning meetings very afraid. I'm going to say something. I'm going to be sounding really, really stupid in front of all these highfalutin professionals, all these people with advanced degrees and all of that stuff. So a family peer support specialist can help them basically find the words, or help them develop the words, and help them develop the gumption to speak up in the meetings. So really, really key functions where the family members end up feeling like I'm supported here. I'm not being judged. I'm not being blamed. It doesn't mean the behavior is okay. The fact that the behavior that we may be worried about in the past doesn't mean we're saying, oh, that behavior doesn't matter, didn't make any difference. We're saying, yeah, that probably was really, really hard. And that behavior probably did make a difference. What can we do now going forward? And in order to move together now with them going forward, we got to engage with them now first, and not be judging, not be coming across in any even subtle way with our biases about what may have happened, our implicit biases, in any kind of subtle way where they feel blamed or shamed or somehow diminished in their role as a parent.
So do the family support specialists get trained similarly to the residential staff in around the, trauma-informed neurocognitive strategies and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What we recommend, I've done a lot of work on hiring family peer support specialists in the country and internationally as well. What we recommend is that they get all the same training as the staff. So they get the same onboarding training as the staff. The ongoing training I mentioned earlier, family peer support specialists they're attending that training, they're part of it. Sometimes they might be delivering that training if it's about working with family members.
Right.
But then they also have some specialized training that's just for their unique role. And that's not unlike other roles we have on the staff. We have some specialized training the therapists go to. We send them to meetings, to trainings, to conferences. Care managers, we send them to. So family peer support specialists, we provide specialized training about judicious self-disclosure, because they've been there, done that.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're basically just telling their whole story to the people they're working with. So how much of the story can they tell? How to think through all that stuff. So the specialized training helps them get certified.
Right.
So baseline the same, specialized for them based on their role.
Excellent. We do have a question that from the audience that I want to share with you. And the question is, what would you say to a QI that's not sure where to start in building their knowledge of QRTPs in their community or their state?
I would first, I don't want to overstep any bounds that I don't understand. But first, I would want, if I was a QI, we're a QI, I'd want to know whoever's hiring me, whatever jurisdiction is hiring me to do that work, what's my degrees of freedom? What am I able to do as a QI in that particular state? Because the rules or the requirements in each state may be different, or in each jurisdiction may be different. So I'd want to know, is it okay if I contact the programs? Are you okay if I develop a professional collaborative partnership with the programs? Just like a good regulator from the state, from a jurisdiction, will have a collaborative relationship with the program, which really helps when they have to come in and something really bad has happened. If there's a collaborative relation, and bad things do happen in residential programs, and they happen in good programs. If there's a collaborative relationship with the regulators, it's much easier to go, okay, let's objectively look at what could have been done differently and what corrective actions we need to take. And it makes it easier for agencies to take those corrective actions. Similarly, if a QI can develop a collaborative relationship, if the jurisdiction will allow that, then that's great. Then probably I would, for me, this sounds overly simple, so I might be missing some of the nuances here, and I appreciate the person asked the question came back with follow-ups, but I'd probably get a list of who are my referrals, who am I going to be referring to, what are likely suspects. Can I get paid? That'd be another question for the jurisdiction. Can I spend some time getting to know the world of the agencies I may be referring to out there? And here's the amount of time I predict: travel time, and spending an hour or two getting a tour of the program, just feeling the program, just getting a tour, feel the program, and maybe an hour or two to review the program documents to get a sense of how do they describe themselves in writing. I'd be looking at trying to get both of those. In person, what does it feel like? If I can go a little bit further, have a little bit more time, and have permission with all appropriate consents and sign-offs, I'd wonder if I could interview a youth or two, or three or four, or a family member or two or three or four, to find out their perspectives of the program, to just get a gauge. And if there's many in the community, what a QI is going to find is they're going to be kind of on a continuum of comfortability for the QI referring to them to less comfortable because of some of the things they experienced there. And to me, that's part of the deal. If you're in the business of providing residential, we need more people in the business, and we need to support them. We need to pay them better. I want to just say that for the residential folks out there. We do need to pay them better. And it should be our objective to make sure we're providing the highest quality possible. And if that means a QI comes in and has a tour and they're a little bit concerned, they let us know the concerns, then we're taking steps to address those concerns. And if a residential program can't do that, then I think realistically it's reasonable for them to look at, is this really what we want to do? Right. And a lot of residential programs have done that and have decided, no, we don't want to do that. And so we have a shortage of residential capacity as a result. One more thing there is QIs may not have that degree of freedom. They may only have a couple of programs, and there's not really a choice. And they may have a tour and feel like this program is not ideal. And then I'd want to try to set up at the state level, the jurisdictional level, how can I convey my concerns to the right folks in the regulatory environment in a collaborative way, not in a gotcha, we're gonna sanction you kind of way, but in a collaborative way, help that program identify opportunities for improvement. Right.
I have one more question for you. And so here it is. Is there any scenario that you could think of where if there was the right mix of intensive community care for a young person, there would not be a need for residential treatment?
Well, I think there's many young people out there and I'm aware of some immediately that I'm working with as a consultant or as in my private practice, who with the right mix in the community of supports for not only for the youth, but also for their family, supporting their family and developing the skills to do the best they possibly can for their children. Where those individual youth would not need residential. If I were master planning the world or master planning a community, I would not want to have a community of any size not have access to residential for those situations where the right mix wasn't enough, or what we thought was the right mix is not working, because it comes to a point where it just seems like keeping the youth in the community indefinitely is not working, and we need some kind of break. And then the nature of that break is probably a short length of stay to help get a bead on what's going on with the youth and their family, and to initiate some skill development, neurocognitive skill development for the youth and for the family, to try to get them back together and then supporting them in the community. I would hate to imagine, a city of any size. I'm in Oregon, so I'd hate to imagine a city like Eugene or Portland or Salem not having access to residential capacity in their community. And enough residentials have closed because of the pressures on residential, and they're not paid well enough, although some states are now beginning to realize they got to pay better, that there might not be perceived access. Some kids are staying in hotels in Oregon. Some kids are lodged in hotels because there's not enough residential capacity. So for the jurisdiction, how can we support residential so there's enough capacity, but then we're making sure it's the right service at the right time for the right duration. And that's what we're struggling with nationally in our policy development and our practice development.
Well, I want to see if you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today.
Well, I guess the thought I would want to share with QIs, assuming the audience is mostly QIs, is I think it's great that you've stepped into this work. It's really, really hard work. It's really, really frustrating at times, and it's real easy to default to what seems like the path of least resistance for a youth. I'm not saying that any QIs do that, but I have had multiple experiences over my many years, almost 50 years in the business, of caseworkers, whoever's referring the youth, basically they just want a place for that youth to be no matter what, without thinking about, is this the right mix? Is this going to work for the youth? And so I know QIs are up against that. Something needs to be done. The capacity may not be what they would like it to be. And so what I would want to say to QIs is thank you for the hard work and for the frustration. And I do believe, and I've seen many examples of really great payoffs when we get the youth to the right place for the right amount of time at the right time. And so you QIs are kind of in the lead of doing that. So I appreciate your presence to do that. And anybody can contact me if they have any follow-up questions as well.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for your thoughts and your wisdom. It's all the time we have for today. And
happy
I
to come
want
back again with more questions.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you. So, I appreciate you taking the time again to talk with us, and thanks to our audience for joining us. The eQiP partnership is organized by the Center for Innovation in Population Health at the University of Kentucky as a collaborative platform assisting QIs and independent assessors seeking support and professional development. Don't forget to use the QR code on the screen to sign up at eqipartnership.org and join our Basecamp project and learn about networking and our next live event. Our next eQuip Learning Collaborative is on December 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm April Fernando from the University of Kentucky Center for Innovation in Population Health. From all of us at the IF Center, thank you for all that you do on behalf of others. We look forward to hearing from you soon.